Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is? Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. Please show your support. I know a lot of you guys watch these and you forget to click like, and then you realize all of a sudden, oh man, there's a lot of dislikes from people who don't like him. So if you guys like what I do, please show your support. It would be greatly appreciated. But over to the point. Scott Herman Fitness, looks like he fired back a little bit at Greg Doucette. Someone linked it to me and said, Jason, you should cover this. What do you think about it? So I went to watch more or less what Scott had to say. Skimmed through his video, watched, a good half of it, just to kind of get a feel for how he feels about the situation, what Scott's doing. And Scott's one of those guys that I might give him a hard time every now and then, but I don't dislike Scott, right? I don't dislike Scott. I'm sure Scott does a pretty good job as a trainer. He's obviously in pretty good shape. I don't think he does everything right, but by that same token, it's not necessary for me to think that someone does everything right to think that they're a pretty good trainer, okay? That's the beauty of it. It's not necessary. I'm sure his clients get pretty good results, right? I'm sure he's a competent trainer all in all. I'm sure he takes plenty of people from the general population and gets them in a pretty good shape. And if you're going to deal with a largely novice audience, which is going to be probably 99% of his audience are going to be novice lifters, that's perfectly reasonable. My disagreements with him are on more nuanced points, things like the above-the-knee rack pull and some other stuff like that. But I think one of the problems he had with Greg is that Greg's kind of grandstanding and Greg's certainty about a lot of things that he tries to talk about is kind of what bothers, I think you can tell it bothers Scott, and it bothers me. This is one reason I don't really support Greg anymore. Greg does put out some good stuff, but he also jumps up and makes statements as absolutes that are provably false, or that he actually gets really, really wrong because he's speaking from a place of ignorance. Okay, and that's ironic for a person who stands there and tells other people all the time, you're an idiot. I mean, that's a problem, guys. That is a problem, right? I mean, in a perfect example, and someone had linked me, and I'm just like, he basically made a video telling you what he thinks other YouTubers make in terms of money, when he clearly is not in the same tier, doesn't talk to other YouTubers. I actually talk to other YouTubers. I kind of know what other guys make. I know what I make. His estimations were coming from a place of ignorance. Like, he missed the mark by such an enormous margin that he should feel like if he actually knew people's real numbers, he would feel like an idiot if he saw how far he missed it by. I'm talking like he wasn't even within the ballpark, not even like, he missed people's guesses of not even within 50% margin of error. He was further outside of that. And I'm not going to get into who or why or mine or anything else, but even mine, it was shockingly inaccurate. I mean, so much so that it was a bad guess. It was a bad guess. Even if it was a random guess, it would have been bad. So he speaks from a place of ignorance, and the same thing with training. And I think that's where Scott's kind of chiming in saying, Greg, I'm giving advice for natural people. And that's the problem we have, is that you have someone like Greg who has achieved a high level of success, but he's achieved a high level of success using certain methods in his way and then says that it's the only way. And that's going to be a problem, right? That is a problem. Just like I will say that I think conjugate is generally the best way to train, okay? But by stating it's the best way to train, does that mean a person can't compete at an elite level doing something else? No. Does it mean someone can't break a world record somewhere doing something else? No. I just think it's generally the best way to train. Okay, there's a difference between saying, I think this is the best, versus saying, I think this is the only way and everything else can't work. Okay, that's ignorant. And there's a problem with Greg. Greg has been doing that lately of taking something of where if you have human studies saying 1, 2, 3, and 4 all seem to be roughly equally effective for producing this result, Greg will jump up and say only number 2 works. It's the only thing that works. And the other 3 don't work at all. But you can go look at human trials and say, well, we can prove you were incorrect. So you're speaking from a place of ignorance. And if a person achieves a high level of success doing method number 2 out of 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are all proven to be equally effective or roughly, they only know about number 2 clearly. You can't take their word on it and say, well, they said it's the only thing that works and that's what they did and they reached this goal, so it must be the only thing that works. Well, that's ignorant, guys. That's an ignorant way to approach life. especially when you have plenty of evidence that the other things work, and it's mainly stuff like rep ranges. That's what I'm talking about specifically. And the problem is that he actually promotes stuff in terms of that kind of works better only for guys on a bunch of gear. Okay, and that's the problem. It's questionable if it's going to be ideal for naturals, right? It's very questionable based upon even the literature and the data. And therein lies the problem. You have a guy like Greg who does have a history of very, very heavy gear use his entire life, promoting methods that may really only work well for guys on gear. And they says, well, no one cares if you're natural. Yeah, but the problem is most of the people out there lifting are natural. Most of the people out there training probably aren't on gear. I would say over half have probably never touched gear. I would say 3/4 at least of people who lift regularly aren't even on gear now. So that's a pretty big demographic. Pretty big demographic. And a lot of people are going to be like, what? You think the numbers are that low? Yeah, in certain countries they are. Like you go to the UK, they've done surveys of guys in the gym, and like 70% of guys who have a gym membership and work out regularly in the United Kingdom admit on surveys to using steroids. Okay, it's like 70%. So, sorry, that's the reality. That's the reality. In other places, you might have entire gyms that are almost entirely clean. So it might skew that, but you get to other places, it's really, really high. So that's why I make a statement like that. But it's fair to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, though, that worldwide, people watching YouTube and fitness who work out, probably more than half are not on gear, okay? And probably will never use gear. That's a pretty big demographic. That's a pretty big demographic of people who need training information. And if we're going to talk about general health and fitness, that's important. And that's the point Scott made, because Greg kind of was saying, people, no one cares if you're natural. Well, in sports worlds and training world, they don't. We really don't. You get into strength sports, no one cares if you're natural or not. And strength sports can be all inclusive. We don't care. Nobody cares. Nobody asks. Because generally all that does is adjust your weight classes. Okay, that's what people need to understand. You take something like powerlifting, the natural guy can still go to the world level in one weight class. There is going to be one weight class that a guy, if he trains hard enough and long enough, can probably make it to the world level in a single weight class and compete against guys on gear and do well. Okay? People need to remember that. People who use gear are more flexible in their weight classes. That's one of the big things it does. Yeah, it gives you more flexibility in your weight class. In the end of the day, does that matter that much? Not really, unless you're competing tested and you're cheating. But most powerlifting meets are not even tested. They're untested. If it's untested, it's not against the rules, and nobody cares. Nobody cares what you do at that point, and you shouldn't. Because again, it gives you an advantage in terms of flexibility of weight classes. It makes a difference there. But a drug-free guy in something like powerlifting can do very, very, very well in probably a single weight class relative to the size of his frame and his height. Okay, he's just going to have to dial everything in perfect. That's what he's going to have to do. He can hang with the guy on his own gear, though. If you do that, you can hang with him just fine. So, over to the point. Scott's like, look, I'm not bragging as a thing. I'm just saying I'm lifetime natural. And I think what we get into is the difference of what Scott is talking about versus what Greg is talking about, is that natural is a marketing term. Okay, the word natural, you shouldn't even be using that. If you're not trying to sell a product, you shouldn't even probably call yourself natural. Because natural to me, as someone who's been in this game a really long time, to me is a marketing term. That's how you sell products. Okay, that's been used in advertising purposes, and now it carried over to the physique world and the training world. Natural, it sounds good, right? That's not even a word. It's not a word you should even be using to imply drug-free. Someone wants to be drug-free, say, hey, I don't use steroids. Okay, there you go. Right, and that's the category I'd place Scott in. I would say someone like Scott, and that's how I would address that, because Scott's trying to make an argument, not understanding fully the argument. I get what he's saying, but what I would say to Scott, brother, just say, man, I don't use drugs. Okay, that's a better way to put it. And you can just state it and move on and be done with it. Man, I don't use gear. I choose not to. I don't think it's good for my health. I don't want it. And see, that's reasonable. The word natural is a marketing term. Natural, I'm wholesome, I'm good, I'm pure. Buy my product. Okay? It's a marketing buzzword. And if you're not trying to market a product based upon that, and generally guys who claim they're natural for purposes of selling a product usually use stuff. It's just a lie because it's a good marketing term and it's catchy. So usually when a guy says, I'm natural 15 times, that guy uses gear. Okay? He's enhanced. Almost every single time. It's a dead giveaway. If you've been in this industry long enough, you know that, by the way. The guy who probably is clean and just doesn't use drugs is the guy when just kind of says, no, man, I don't use gear. I prefer not to use steroids. I care about my health. And he doesn't run around saying he's natural all the time. That guy, there's actually a reasonable chance that guy is clean, unless he just obviously clearly uses. I'm more inclined to believe that guy. Even if a guy is weak and tiny and looks terrible and runs around screaming he's natural all the time to sell products, that guy's on gear. That guy's on gear. He's just got really bad genetics and he's lazy. He's on gear every single time. But I digress. Back to the point. I think that's the thing that bothered Scott the most with some of that, was he had Greg making a big deal about that, and Scott's like, well, that's totally not fair, because you got guys like me that I am fit, I am in shape, I've been training my whole life, and I train mostly natural people, and I feel like that gives me a good perspective to help people who are natural, and that there are a lot of people out there who run around selling products based upon their natural status, who use a bunch of gear and they give them garbage programs and garbage training. And what he said to Greg was, but Greg, I don't think that's you. I don't think that's you. It's like, in fact, when you talk about the fluff and pump thing, you train really hard. The guys who we're talking about who just do fluff and pump on gear are lazy. You probably train pretty hard. And that's kind of a point of contention I've had with Greg also in the past, and I would agree with Scott there. You got guys like Greg who will say, oh, lifting heavy doesn't help with anything. But it's like, Greg, you built your base as a power lifter. Greg has competed at the world level as a power lifter many, many years ago. Okay? He was bigger as a power lifter than he is right now. It's a little bit hilarious and hypocritical to then market nothing but lightweight training later in life when you have personally benched 500 pounds in competition and deadlifted over 700 as a power lifter who was bigger than when you're now later in life as a bodybuilder, was bigger then, to then come over and tell guys, no, you just need to do fluff and pump. Just do fluff and pump, guys, high reps. Heavy weight doesn't make you big. Doesn't contribute at all. That's ridiculous. And it's silly. He's the last person who can be claiming that. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that even powerlifters don't do a bunch of high reps. Because you know what? Let's be honest here. If you want to get bigger, yes, you need to get strong. If you're drug-free, you damn well better get strong. You better get really strong if you want to be big. But you're still going to have to do training volume. You're still going to have to train for volume to reach your maximum size potential. Okay? No one's disagreeing with that. How do I train guys as a power lifter? I do more sets of 10 than I do heavy work. A lot more. Yeah, watch my training vlogs. I do a lot of 10 rep sets. Whole lot of them. Probably more than half of my training every week. Okay? Still do my heavy singles. But, so no one's denying that, but this idea that lifting heavy doesn't help you get big is ludicrous. And Greg is someone who has lifted insanely heavy at an elite level of heavy, historically, in sanctioned competition, kind of already built a base doing that. He can do whatever he wants now, because he's smaller now. He doesn't have to maintain the size he had back then. Bad example to use. And I think the problem we run into is that Greg has done stuff for so many years enhanced that I don't think he always has a good context for the legitimate novice drug-free lifter of what they need to be doing to get big. Okay. I think he's lost the context of it, and this is my opinion. And I think that's kind of what Scott is saying also, because Scott is dealing with largely a population of people who maybe don't have good genetics, not genetically gifted, they're not on gear, they're novice lifters, and the advice that they need is going to be very, very, very different from what someone like Greg is putting out. It's going to be very different. And Scott probably could help a lot of those people out pretty well. And that's his audience, that's his niche. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.